Josh, thank you so much for coming back to the show. Very nice to see you again.
Absolutely. Good to be back.
Great to have you here because you've been writing a lot about Chris Christie.
I have.
And were you at all surprised by this sort of behavior in a governor?
Well, I was surprised by the specifics of the George Washington Bridge thing. Like, it was an egregious abuse of power. I believe the governor didn't know about it in advance, but the thing is that, for 4 years, part of the way he's governed the state is by this sort of petty politics of retribution and favors that you give out to local officials and members of the legislature. But in a lot of cases, it's actually been a good thing. When people...
I thought that was the point of getting elected, right? No.
Well, but also, like, when people talk about why they like Chris Christie, they tend to say things like, well, he brings people together and he gets things done. How exactly do they think he's been doing that? Like, partly it's about, because he's been a centrist. And part of that is about picking issue positions that people like and listening to people, and he's generally done a pretty good job of that. But it's also, you make people feel like they'll be better off being with you than being against you. And you use the powers that are available to the governor's office to bring municipal officials and members of the legislature in line. And he's got a lot of substantive achievements with the Democrats who run the legislature in his state. And if you want to see what a government looks like when people don't do that, you just need to look to Washington, where the president has very little power to punish either members of his own party or the other party who don't do what he wants in Congress. Leadership in Congress, because they've gotten rid of earmarks, basically have no way to buy off members of their party. And so when that happens, people just get very ideological. They don't make deals, and the government sort of falls apart. So in New Jersey, you've gotten 4 budgets that have been agreed to by both parties, passed early. You've gotten various major reforms done, and the governorship more or less has worked. Now, that doesn't mean he should have shut down the bridge. Like, that was an overreach. But when you talk about, well, how much less petty should the government be
there's
in
a
New
line
Jersey?
Somewhere, and looks like he's crossed it a couple times.
I think his administration has crossed it, but you do want some amount of this stuff where you have the governor putting pressure on people to get into line, because that's how compromises are made in politics. I think, people talked about earmarks being a big waste, but they were a very small part of the federal budget, and they did a lot to grease the wheels in Congress and to get people not to do, to get people to come to agreements. I was talking with a former official in administration who was talking about, why it's so important to have earmarks. And he's like, well, if you don't have earmarks, how are you going to get people onto your side? Not on the merits. They don't care about the merits.
Right.
And I think that's basically right. I think Christie, for the most part, has found a way to make government work. It's just a question of making sure that people don't go overboard. And I think what it demonstrated is his administration has run amok. And particularly his defense of it was kind of embarrassing, where he's saying, well, I didn't know what happened. I'm so angry at these people. He's saying, I have an administration of people who are out of control and aren't telling me what they're doing.
Right.
That was a problem. He needs to rein them in, but he only needs to rein them in so much.